Thank you very much. So my name is Ron Stuver, and I'm from Rockwell Automation, and I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about Industry 4.0. When I came here, I actually thought Craig asked me to talk about volcanoes. It was some sort of a geological event. So I dispatched my son and his new wife to Hawaii, and they've been sending me pictures from the Big Island and volcano. But this morning, Greg said, nah, we changed our minds. We want you to talk about smart manufacturing. So I spent the morning recrafting the presentation to talk about smart manufacturing. I am a rehire to Rockwell, so I spent the first 15 years after I served in the military working on PLC2s and 1774 and T3, T4 terminals and all that fun stuff. And then all of a sudden software came around and we had to figure out how to load that on personal computers with 2 disk drives, right? No hard drive and things like that. I worked for 15 years in the industrial automation space and then spent another 15 years in the consulting world doing business consulting, IT, ERP stuff, and then I returned to Rockwell when they created a new consulting services group that I'm going to talk about this morning. So my agenda this morning is not volcanoes, but rather we're going to talk about Industry 4.0. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it is and then why you should care. Where's the value of Industry 4.0? And Rockwell's response to Industry 4.0, which we call the connected enterprise. We're going to talk a little bit about how you get started with it. So once you kind of get the flavor for what it is and all this advanced technology and why should I care, there's value in it, okay, great, what do I do about it? And then I'm going to introduce the Rockwell Automation Consulting Services Group and what we do to help you with that. And I'm not going to leap off the stage, but I am going to come down to the floor. I'm going to walk down the steps because I don't want to be the guy on camera that falls off the stage. So digital stuff is everywhere. And it's all around us. How many of you, and if you're embarrassed to raise your hand, you can kind of go like this at your table. How many of you are still controlling your HVAC at home with a dial on the wall? And I see a couple of hands. My hand was up until last November when I finally replaced my air conditioning and heating units, and I put digital stuff in place. And the cool thing about that was I didn't see the need to do it, right? I just had this dial on the wall, and when it got cold, we just turned it up. But my wife's parents live with us. They're elderly, a lot of health issues, and my mother-in-law would call my wife at work and say in the middle of winter, hey, Leanne, it's kind of cold in the house. Well, what's she supposed to do about it? She's at work, right? And if my mother-in-law goes over and touches the dial, who knows where it's going? So now, my wife can pull out her cell phone and look at the temperature in the house and adjust it right from work. So think about the digital transformation that I just had in the last year at home. How many of you have watched the TV series MASH? Yeah, more hands go up. So I guess we're more into MASH than we are in the dial on the wall. So you know how radar communicated with people? So, Colonel Potter or Henry Blake would say, get so-and-so on the line. And what did he do? He went into his desk, and he picked up the little phone, and he went like this, and he cranked it, right? Sent a little current down the line, and it buzzed who? Sparky, right? Hey, Sparky, Colonel Potter needs to talk to somebody on the other end. Well, then they were putting patch cords all over the place. That same equipment is what I was dealing with in the 1980s when I was a young Army officer. So it hadn't changed much in all that time for us, right? We were still doing this stuff and putting patch cords all over the place. My Army digital transformation was that while I was in the service, not only did we get rid of the old steel pots and put the new Kevlar helmets on our heads, which I didn't like because you couldn't do as much as you could with a steel pot. I couldn't shave out of the Kevlar helmet like I could with a steel pot. But from a communications perspective, we went digital. And I actually sat behind a personal computer and was on the ARPANET, the predecessor to the internet. We're going to talk a lot about that today. I also saw a big old green box that had a bunch of numbers on it. It was picking up satellites, and it was GPS. And now we're all walking around with a cell phone in our pocket, and it can tell us where we're at and tell us where we're going, and GPS is now in our pocket. So in the last, 25, 30 years, we've seen quite a digital transformation. So this stuff is all over the place, all around us. And the last personal story I want to tell is, I'm a runner. So I still, even to this day, like to go out and run. And when I was a teenager, I'd say, hey, Mom, I'm going out for a run, and I'd take off and come back and open up my little Jim Fix running book calendar version, and I'd write in there, I ran 3.5 miles today. The weather was crappy. crappy and I felt crappy, right? How did I know it was 3.5 miles? I took my bicycle or my car, and I drove the route, and I'd say, oh, 3.5 miles. Today, it's right here.
What was that?
My GPS watch from Garmin. I say, hey to my wife, I'm going for a run, I hit the button, and off I go. When I come back, I hit a button, and all the data from my watch goes up into the cloud. How far I went, where I went, my cadence, my pace, my heart rate, all that data is now up in the cloud. I connect with my app, and I can look at that stuff. And I get really geeky about that data, because now I can work with the local track coach or read my running magazines, and I can set workouts in the cloud and send that stuff back down to my watch, and I use the data about my performance to plan my next workout. And it's even got some really crude, predictive maintenance kind of stuff in it for my shoes. So normally in the past, I would go running until my plantar fasciitis or my Achilles tendon stuff would act up, and when my feet hurt, I'd go to the running store and buy new shoes. Well now, my app that's collecting all this data is alerting me to say, hey, dum-dum, you've got about 350, almost 400 miles on these shoes, time to go buy a new pair of shoes, right? And how is that any different than what we're talking about out in our factories, where we would like to collect this data and maybe do something intelligent with it and have that information not only alert us, but maybe be a little bit predictive or prescriptive when it comes to analytics, and tell us when we need to pay attention to the maintenance out on the floor when it comes to things like productivity and reliability. So what is this fourth industrial revolution? Go back in time. The first industrial revolution was the advent of steam power, right? And then we added electricity, and Henry Ford said, let's make things work faster. And the assembly line was the second industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution, for a lot of us in the room, is what we experienced in the 70s and the 80s when automation started hitting the factory floor. PLCs, drives, all kinds of other automation, but it was islands of machines doing what they do best. The fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, is all about taking those islands of automation, connecting them, and taking the data that's down there and moving it across and up. So we're going to talk about that horizontal and vertical movement of data in Industry 4.0. So let's introduce you to some terms that you need to understand, and I'll summarize this slide this way. In the lower right corner, we talk about IoT. IoT is the Internet of Things. Might just be where I'm standing. IoT, the Internet of Things. I like to say it backwards. Things that are on the Internet. And then just above that, they add another I. IoT. Now we're talking about a subset of things that are on the Internet that are industrial. So the industrial Internet of Things. To the left of that, digital manufacturing, which really is just a term that represents how we're connecting all of these things that are on the Internet or in our factories on our industrial networks. Above that, we have Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing, or smart factory, I should say. And those two terms are about how we use the data that's down below on all of those devices and make smart decisions. And smart manufacturing is just an umbrella term, and above that is digital transformation. I'm going to show you a slide that talks about that from a supply chain perspective in a minute. Notice on this previous slide I had Industry 4.0 spelled with the IE. We're going to come back to that. Industry 4.0 is a global thing. And if you look at the flags up there and the words that are beside the flags, one of the things that you might notice if you can read that is that it doesn't all say the same thing. So we talk about smart manufacturing or Industry 4.0, but not in every country do they see it the same way. This is a wordy slide, but I'm going to break it up into two categories for you. Some countries like the United States and Japan view Industry 4.0 as an industrial-driven activity or initiative, whereas other countries like Germany, China, and India see this as a government-driven initiative. The difference is, in the US and Japan, we're just kind of letting industry And industry associations figure out what this is all about, and it's mostly technology driven. In Germany, they have a social aspect to Industry 4.0, and that's where the IE comes from, by the way. So when you see Industry 4.0 with the IE, that's something coming out of Germany in the press. But in Germany, the social aspect is the government's actually infusing the educational system with money, funding, to make sure that their workforce is up to speed on all this technology and prepared for Industry 4.0 in the future. In China, their goal is simply to be, China 2025, to be the #1 manufacturer in the world in 2025. They want to lead the world in manufacturing, and they've got certain key industries that they're focused on, and government dollars are going into those industries. And in India, they are trying to attract companies to come to India, build manufacturing facilities there, and they realize that to do that and be successful, they need to improve their infrastructure, roads, bridges, and internet. And that's where a lot of their government dollars are going. So there's a little bit of a difference when we talk about Industry 4.0 from a global perspective. Industry 4.0 at its core is about data. This is kind of a busy slide, but if you look at the circle, data and systems management is in the middle. And just outside of that, it talks about horizontal and vertical integration. And we're going to talk a little bit about data moving sideways and data moving up into your enterprise. And then around that, in the red, you have to have a foundation of Industry 4.0 hardware and software that is ready for the internet. You do have solutions that can stay on-premise, but also moving data into the cloud if appropriate. Connected supply chain. So we're going to talk mostly today about smart manufacturing. So most of my conversation is going to be about what's inside the dotted red box. But I want to make sure that we understand that this is not limited to just the factory floor. So when we think about connected supply chain, we're talking about how are we designing our products, where's all of that information about our products stored, how are we sharing what we need in terms of specifications with our suppliers, how are we planning and procuring to buy the ingredients or the raw materials or the parts that we need to supply our manufacturing process. How are those pieces coming into the manufacturing operations now reaching the dotted red box, and how are we tracking that material as it flows through our production processes? The actual management of manufacturing execution inside the red box. And when we have a finished goods item, how does that data follow that product outside into the warehouses, transportation to our customers? And how do we feed some of that status back to our ERP system so that we know that we can flush the raw materials that we've used? So the connected supply chain goes from end to end, and we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about what's inside the red box, but we need to be aware of the fact that this data has a place outside the red box itself. Gartner says that this whole concept of digital initiatives is worth about $4 trillion to our economy by 2025. And companies that are pursuing digital initiatives are seen as being more competitive, and ultimately shareholders like to hear that news. From a smart manufacturing perspective, we break things up into three primary buckets. We've got operational productivity, so we'll come into a plant and look for opportunities to improve productivity. On the right side, we've got reliability. We're talking about predictive or prescriptive analytics to help with maintenance. And in the middle, risk. That could be compliance and things like track and trace. What data about your product is following the life cycle of that product so that if there's anything on the outside that's warranty related, you can go back and find it. And I've got stories from the Rockwell story I'm going to tell in a few minutes about how we weren't too good at that a while back. Gartner also says that by 2020 there's going to be about 20 billion devices connected to the internet. 5.5 billion of those in the industrial space. But the part of this particular survey that I found interesting was that over half the devices connected out in the factories are not going to be connected to an industrial protocol. There are still a lot of pieces of equipment, sensors, machines, controllers that are islands out in factories, and the data is not flowing horizontally and is not coming up into the enterprise or into the information solution space that we'll talk about. And that takes us to the Rockwell Automation Connected Enterprise story. So Some years back, Rockwell teamed up with Cisco. And to help converge what's at the plant level with the enterprise level, they created standards and an industrial protocol for using Ethernet in an industrial setting. And if I turn that slide on its side, the reason to do that is so that we can move data. And on this particular slide, we're looking at the enterprise or ERP on the left and manufacturing execution on the right. And this is one of those slides that we actually used at Rockwell when we were first thinking about, if we connect this stuff, what is it that we care about that's at the enterprise level that we need to move to manufacturing? And what's happening in the manufacturing world that needs to come back to our enterprise systems? And this is just a neat slide to look at what is the category of information that we were moving back and forth between our systems. The connected enterprise picture that we like to show is, it looks like this. At the bottom, you'll see the sensors, the level 0, 1, 2 equipment, controllers, HMI. Just above that is that infrastructure I talked about. We can't move the data unless it's connected. And we want to make sure that it's connected on a safe and secure infrastructure. Above that is the information solutions layer, and that's where you run into software solutions like the MES solutions that we have, like Factory Talk. We also have analytics solutions. We also have the ability to look at data through mobile technology. And then over on the right, you'll see a little icon that says Connected Services. We have all kinds of great services from Rockwell where we can actually support companies that maybe don't have enough bandwidth of staff to manage their IT infrastructure at the plant level. And we can help with that with both hardware, software, and remote services. Above that, the area that I like to talk about, and the area that our consulting team is focused on, is what the customer's desired outcomes are. So when I talk to customers today, I'm not focused on the bottom. Some 20-some years ago, I was all into PLC2s and PLC5s and all that great stuff, and that's not where I am today. I'm at the other end of the scale. I want to sit down and talk to you about what you're trying to accomplish. Where are you going in your business? Are you trying to save, and it's about cost in your factory, or are you expanding, and it's about capacity? Where is the desired outcome, and how do we help you find value in all of this Industry 4.0 technology? So why do companies pause and not move forward? What stops people from taking that leap into the connected enterprise and spending a few dollars so that they can see value? And the answer is, McKinsey, Gartner, and the Mechanical Engineering Association did some surveys. And we had one of our analysts do a little bit of research on what they found, and we found that of the top 5 issues, the top 4 were all in alignment for what they surveyed with customers. And the bottom line is a lot of people just can't find the business justification. They get that there's this technology out there, Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing and all these buzzwords, but they don't know how to justify it. So if I'm going to spend this money here, how do I make sure that I'm getting some value out of it over here? The other is, in some cases they get it, but they just don't have the staff. They're just not big enough to have people on staff to chase it down. We also had an understanding, and the other words that were in that one is clarity and courage. In some cases, companies just don't have the courage to step forward into smart manufacturing and deploy some of this technology. And the last one is data security. We've heard examples of companies that have been hacked, or somebody innocently takes a laptop that may have a virus on it, they plug it into something out on the factory floor, and they infect other computers on the factory floor with a virus. That's a whole lot different than in the IT space, where if someone in accounting can't do their job today, yeah, it's painful, right? But as long as we don't lose data, we're okay. But in the factory floor, if that happens and we shut things down, we've got a real problem. John McDermott says how we get started with customers is we have to actually sit down and understand where they're going. And on the Connected Enterprise slide, that was that stuff at the top. We need to truly understand what your desired outcomes are and where you're trying to go. But the interesting thing about this is that not everybody has the same desired outcomes. So there's not a cookie-cutter approach to this. And our consulting services team doesn't have a bunch of templates that work for everybody. Because we need to sit down and understand what each customer is trying to do. It turns out that it's more of a collaborative, kind of trusted advisor kind of role that we have. And we need to sit down and match up where you're going with the solutions in smart manufacturing that will help you get there. So what do we listen for? When I go out and sit down and have conversations with customers, these are some of the things I hear. Ron, I've heard of it. I saw your presentation. I get it. How do I get started? I don't have the staff. I don't know what to do next. What's the plan? How do we plan the plan? Another one is, Ron, I get it, but I've got to go to my boss who's going to sign the check. And he said, boy, you want that? Well, you got to tell me, if I sign the check for that, you got to show me where I'm getting something back. Where's my return on investment? What am I going to get back out of it in the factory? Are you going to reduce the downtime that we're experiencing? Are you going to increase my capacity? What are you going to do with this money? How do we justify that, right? This is one of my favorites. We've tried this and we've tried that, but we just didn't move the needle. Usually an indicator to me that what's happened is someone has sold them a bright, shiny object, and they said, great, let's pilot that. And they pilot it in a very small space, and it does what it's supposed to do, but the guys back here that wrote the check said, what did I get? Well, it works, but they're looking for some sort of financial value, some sort of return on the investment. And my response to that is, those kinds of pilot projects have a place on a roadmap, but they need to have a purpose, and we need to know where they're at, and we need to set expectations. Another one of my favorites is I hear this once in a while. Hey, everything's great. We're running efficiently. Oh, you are. So I sat around a table not too long ago where the CEO said, things are better now. We're running more efficiently than we were before. 2 years ago, we hired Justin, and Justin's our data guy. And Justin runs around collecting all this great data. We've got this master spreadsheet. You guys don't have spreadsheets, right? Master spreadsheet. Before we had the spreadsheet, we didn't have visibility into what was going on in our process. But now we've got the spreadsheet and we can schedule better. And Justin, who was sitting next to me, the data guy, he's kind of looking down. And I kind of nudged him and said, I bet it takes a lot of time to put that spreadsheet together every month and keep it up to date. He goes, yeah, it's full of all kinds of data quality issues. People don't put the right data in there. And I looked around the table and there were other people kind of looking up at the ceiling. So I could tell that while the CEO thought things were running better, the other people around the table knew that things were not as rosy as he said. And to put the data in that spreadsheet, some people were walking, 50 yards down a ladder, reading a piece of data off of some sort of device, coming back up the ladder, opening the spreadsheet up on a computer screen, punching the data in, right? And if they forgot to do that and they did it later, they'd go, that was about 2 o'clock, and they put the timestamp in, right? So just an example of we're already running efficiently, maybe not always the case. So Rockwell as a company is over $6 billion. We've got a lot of people scattered around the globe. And the interesting thing about Rockwell is we manufacture stuff too. So we're not just out there with a bunch of sales guys selling stuff. We actually have our own operations and manufacturing operations within Rockwell. We have 18 plants around the globe. And our orders average about 200 SKUs for each order. So we actually have deployed the connected enterprise in all of our plants globally. And some people will look at me and say, well, that's kind of like you're eating your own dog food. Well, yeah, exactly. So here's what it looks like. We have plants all over the globe. And before we pursued our own Industry 4.0 initiatives, things were not so good. We did not have visibility into our systems because we have a lot of them and they were not connected. On the right, good data was hard to find. So somebody would ask a question about a product, and in our Twinsburg facility, we had 3 different quality systems. So as that particular product would flow through the manufacturing process, by the time it came out the other end, if somebody had to go look something up about that particular run, they would have to look at 3 different quality software applications to put all the pieces together, spitting out data into spreadsheets, gathering all that data in more spreadsheets. It would take days to pull it all together from a quality perspective. We looked at all of the issues, and we realized that we just had a ton of custom applications. We had a couple dozen ERP systems scattered around the globe, and no single system running our manufacturing processes. And we could boil those down into 3 primary buckets where we had issues. We had problems with how our people were trained to do their job. We had problems with the process in our manufacturing, and ultimately, we had a lot of technology that was old and scattered and custom and was not working very well. So what we did was we embarked on a journey where we said, we're going to have one ERP system. We picked SAP, and we picked a new plant that we were building in Mexico. And we had an 18-month project to spin that plant up, deploy SAP, get the MES software that we make, Factory Talk, right, Production Center, put that in that plant, work out the bugs, make it all work, and then a multi-year rollout, where about every 6 months we had 3 or 4 plants that we had on the list, and we started rolling out the SAP and the MES solution in those plants globally. Now, we have visibility of our plants. Our plant manager can be standing in Mequon with a tablet in his hand, hit a little drop down and be looking at what's going on in a particular manufacturing cell in Singapore. We actually have the ability to do better with just sharing best practices across all of our plants. So when we have cells that are making similar products in different plants, and they look at the efficiency of those particular machines and how they're operating, and we see that one of them in a particular plant is operating at a much lower productivity than the other ones based upon how we measure it, those plant guys can talk to one another, and they do. And it's like, hey, what are you doing that's different, that you're running more efficiently than I am? And they share best practices, they make adjustments, and they fix things. And ultimately, we have all this data that's flowing up into our manufacturing and information solutions layer and into the enterprise. It makes it easier to see things. And this is some of the benefits that we've received from Industry 4.0 technology. So on the left is my favorite, and actually instead of saying reduction, that should say avoidance. Now that we have better visibility into our manufacturing processes and we measure things consistently across the globe, the plants that would put their capital expenditure budget requests in every year, that were looked at independently, are now looked at globally. And our finance guys have said that over time, we've actually been able to avoid about 30% of the spending, and without this visibility into our information, we would have spent about 30% more in capital spending on projects. But now we can figure out where it's smart to put our money. The 1/3 in reduction in inventory, that's just a representation that we are better at manufacturing our own products. We are more flexible, more efficient, and therefore we have to carry less inventory because we can respond to customer orders more effectively than we used to. To do all of this, it was very important that our plant operations, our engineering teams, and our IT staff were all in sync. And we had to make sure that from one plant to the next, that we didn't have any bottlenecks where somebody in a particular plant said, yeah, I hear you, but I'm okay doing it the way I'm doing it. How do you get over those roadblocks? Change management when it comes to people. And it's really all about, in the upper right corner, executive sponsors. We had folks in high places that said, we are going to do this, and you guys are all going to get on board, and this is the roadmap. And that was a very, very important piece. So when it comes to helping customers, Rockwell Automation has invested and created a consulting services team, which I am a part of. They said, we realize that our customers are going to need help putting all of this advanced technology together, figuring out how to justify it, and deploying Industry 4.0 techniques. And they put our consulting services team together, and people look at Rockwell and go, consulting? Rockwell, what? How's that work? When you think of consulting, you usually think of the big guys, the McKinseys, the BCGs, the Accentures that are up here working at the enterprise level. And they may have a manufacturing practice, but are they really going to be able to go as deep as we can? Because at the end of the day, if I'm working with a customer on a particular engagement, and we're taking it to the implementation stage, I've got direct access to the people that are going to help me get there. And that's the key to it for us, is that we have seasoned expertise with people on our team that understand manufacturing operations. The gentleman that I report to was a plant manager, walked in your shoes, was out of the plant, was VP of Manufacturing Operations for global, multiple plants. Then he worked at PwC, and he did some consulting work there from a supply chain perspective. And he's had procurement experience. And the rest of the members of our team, he's added different cards to the mix, so we're not all homogeneous. We don't all have the same expertise. He's mixed us up so that we bring different characteristics to the team. What we do is we help you on what we call this 4-step journey. We just kind of boil it down to this. It starts with an assessment and helping you build a plan so that there's some sort of a roadmap and you understand where you're trying to go and how you're going to get there. And if there are pilot projects, that you understand that those pilot projects have a purpose and you know where they fit on that roadmap. And that's step 1. Step 2 is we've got to make sure that the equipment that's out in your factories is up to snuff. Whether it's controllers, sensors, other devices, machines, the network infrastructure. If we're going to be moving data, we need to make sure that the equipment that you have out there is ready to go. And this is actually a step where sometimes people will say, we upgraded our controllers, we upgraded from PLC5s to control logics, but we didn't see any of this great value, right? Where's it going? And the answer is step 2 is one of those things that's necessary so that you can reach steps 3 and 4. And in step 3, we start to gather that data and use the tools to help you either real-time look at data, use it for alarming, or put it into solutions that can help you do predictive analytics, and then the MES to look at the execution of the manufacturing process. Step 4 is where we're at Rockwell now. So it's continuous improvement. Our journey is not over. We are still working through process improvements and utilizing new tools that we're creating for ourselves and for you. Our approach from a consulting services team perspective is not cookie cutter. I mentioned that before. It could be that you're starting up a new plant. It could be that you have an existing plant. Maybe you have multiple plants, and through acquisitions, they're at different levels of maturity, right? And we'll look at those independently, and we could do a plant digital transformation study. We also have the ability to do just overall operations, or if you know that what you need is a particular solution for a particular area, and if that's what's right for you, we can do one of these IoT product justification assessments and help you with that as well. And for each of these, it'll be different customer by customer because where you are on your journey can be different. Your digital maturity is going to be different and be different plant to plant. Building your roadmap looks like this. So we start by understanding where you're going and helping you define a strategy. And then making sure that your IT guys and your OT guys are in sync with where things are going. Because at the end of the day, this can't be a IT's over here and your plant operational technology guys are over here. They've got to be aligned and in sync with one another. We also want to help with executive support because I mentioned earlier with the Rockwell story, sponsorship is very, very important. If you don't have executive support, it's not going anywhere. And then you need to make sure that you have a good change management process in place and that you bring people from your operations into your journey and your roadmap. If you come to Twinsburg, Ohio, or Mequon, Wisconsin, and tour the Rockwell plants, you'll get a presentation. You'll hear from somebody in plant operations about our journey. And then when you go tour the lines, you'll actually hear from the people that are out on the lines doing the work. There are people in some of those tours that said, yeah, I wasn't really sure about this at the beginning, but I've been here for 12 years and I can tell you that things are better now, right? And those are the people that are out on the lines that are actually going to be talking to you on those tours. So, again, just to go back to where we started, Industry 4.0, while we're talking about the stuff inside the red box, we have to be aware of the fact that we're talking about an entire connected supply chain. So we need to understand from a data perspective where things are moving. And when it comes to the connected enterprise, it really is about making sure that your hardware and software and infrastructure is up to speed and can support these Industry 4.0 standards. When it comes to delivering the benefits of Industry 4.0, I talked about this earlier. A successful project has to start with understanding what your desired outcomes are. We need to know where your particular business is trying to go, what are the problems you're trying to solve, and where you're trying to take your business. Combine that with the team that we have and the expertise that we have, and we can help you put those roadmaps together. And how you start after this conference and you hit all of these wonderful sessions today, reach out to one of your Rexel representatives and say, hey, something that Ron said jives with me, and I'd like to take that conversation further. Or if you have a personal relationship with the Rockwell Automation account manager, talk to them. And at Rockwell headquarters in Milwaukee, this is the gentleman that I report to, Dave Stonehouse. Dave's email address is up there. If you happen to send him a note and say, hey Dave, I saw Ron talk at this conference and I'd like to talk to you more, tell him I was at the Rexel conference so that we can tie that loop back. And one thing I want to tell you about Rockwell and our commitment to the connected enterprise and to our team is that our CEO, Blake Moret, just about a week ago, announced a reorganization in our company, and our consulting services team for the connected enterprise was actually moved a little bit closer to him. So we moved up in the organization, and Dave is now just one door away from the CEO. Blake Moret is saying that we are going to help our customers bring the connected enterprise to life, and he's all in. And to do that, he realizes that our group is the tip of the spear to help customers reach the potential of Industry 4.0, and Dave is the guy that's going to help get us there. Great gentleman. So I want to say thank you to all of you for attending today. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. I'm going to be here for the next hour, so after this is over and you head off to your technical sessions, if you'd like to come up and hit me personally, I'd be happy to do that. And one thing I would like to ask, to put this event on, the Rexel team has done a fabulous job, and there's a lot of time that goes into planning this event, and I think the Rexel team deserves a great round of applause for what they've put together today.